Life doesn't always make sense. It's like a video game filled with obstacles, twists, and turns. And yet there are no user manuals to tell you what to do, what to expect. And all we see is a society that associates money and titles to success. So we chase. Growing up in a dysfunctional family and unconventional circumstances, I didn't think that one day I could actually look back and be grateful for everything that had happened. Even though things might not make sense to you right now, but I promise you, one day, it will. And I know it might be hard for you to believe that you're going to be okay. So here is proof. Let me tell you my story. I was born in Guangzhou, China, but shortly after birth, my parents migrated to Canada, and I was raised by my grandma in China in her humble home. We didn't have a lot, but we were happy. Even though she was illiterate, she had the biggest heart. She had hearing problems, so she talked loud and laughed even louder. In many ways, she was the biggest role model I had growing up. I really looked up to her humble, down-to-earth, and kind-hearted personality. I remember we'd spend an entire day walking, taking various forms of transportation, just to visit the countryside where she grew up. She'd walk me to and from school every day, take me to parks, and I love all those simple moments with her. When I was 8, my parents were finally able to bring me to Canada. And so, I tearfully said goodbye to my grandma. Along with it was as close to a healthy childhood environment I've ever had. Despite Canada being a better environment to grow up in, the Western culture also brought along many temptations that my parents succumbed to. Their desires to buy expensive things and cars, to live a lifestyle beyond their means just to impress other people. They seeked shortcuts in life, which later came back to haunt them. The stress of keeping up with their facade caused a lot of arguments and fights, and eventually led them to develop unhealthy habits to cope. As a kid growing up in this environment, I didn't have anyone to look up to. I was left on my own to deal with many of the problems that children face in school, such as bullying, trying to fit in, peer pressure, just to name a few. And because I was Asian and didn't speak English at the time, I was an easy target. In one of the most important periods of my childhood, they were there, but they weren't there. Fast forward to my teenage years, my family finally decided to start over, away from the mess they created for themselves, and settled in another city on the other side of the country. But the damage in me has already been done, carrying a big load of baggage which was invisible to me at the time. As a teenager, I started to also struggle with my identity and sexuality. Through working several part-time jobs, I managed to fund my way through college, found myself a job, and bought myself a car. But in 2013, everything came crashing down on me. I thought I found love, but instead, my heart was shattered. I thought I found my dream job, but I was miserable. I thought the whole family drama was behind me, but I was dead wrong. With everything that was going on, I went to a really dark place in life. This time, it wasn't just the family issues that I had to deal with growing up. Now that I'm a young adult looking to make a mark in this world, I had much more to juggle this time around, and I completely broke. But instead of continuing down this hole of darkness, I decided to take control of the situation. I realized that things don't get better without taking action. And at the time, I had nothing to lose. It was time for a drastic change. So I dropped everything, quit my job, and joined a volunteering organization to volunteer in Kenya for a month. Perhaps this was the eat, pray, love moment that I needed at the time to find myself. And this turned out to be the best decision of my life. Other than my birthplace, I have never been outside of Canada before, let alone doing so by myself. So I really didn't know what to expect, who I'll encounter, or what kind of crazy things will happen. But this turned out to be the most life-changing thing I have ever experienced. I was placed in a school located in Kibera, the largest slum in Nairobi, capital of Kenya. I met so many volunteers from all over the world, with all walks of life, the friendly locals and all the joyful little ones at school. I learned so much from them, and it changed my perspective on life. Despite the harsh living conditions they lived in, they were cheerful. Despite what very little possessions they had, they were smiling, laughing, and dancing. I still remember walking down Kibera every morning to my placement. The kids on the street would jump up and down, cheerfully waving their hands, asking me "How are you?" repeatedly, as they were excited to practice their English. It quickly made me realize how fortunate I was, how privileged I was, and the problems that I was troubled by back home were in a way insignificant. To add to the experience, along with the other volunteers, we went on excursions on the weekends, experiencing many things for the first time in my life. And these unforgettable moments were simply magical. For the very first time in my life, I felt free. I felt alive. I went into Kenya with a broken heart, feeling insecure, depressed, and lost. But when I left, I was a changed person. I saw a world outside my bubble that was filled with life. I learned what it's like to love myself. I learned that happiness has nothing to do with our possessions. Kenya was a magical place for me, and I will never forget this experience. Asante sana.
Don't you know? Talking about a revolution sound.
The original plan was to do a stopover in UK for a quick trip before going home. But instead, this new me had an idea. Because I had left my job and dropped everything back home, there was no rush to go back. And so, with my backpack, a few shirts, and a new perspective on life, I embarked on yet another life-changing experience. Hopping from hostel to hostel, country to country, through highs and lows and countless setbacks, I learned so much from all the places I visited, their culture, the history, the people I encountered. Like this elderly couple I met on the plane because I had missed an earlier flight. They taught me about being patient and that there's no need to rush because we'll all get there eventually. The entire trip was filled with lessons that simply cannot be learned through textbooks, and I'm forever grateful for this experience. It not only opened my eyes to more cultures and what it means to work to live and not live to work, it further solidified my desire to live differently. 2013 was a special year for me. From the lowest of lows to the highest of highs, it was the year that started it all. A journey of self-discovery and realization. As much as I wanted to continue traveling the world, reality sets in. My bank account has been nearly depleted, and so I moved to Toronto after accepting a job offer and began the corporate grind yet again. This chapter of my life was an important one, because this is when I started to figure out who I truly was and what I want in life. I also met a guy who helped me stay grounded and was able to give me the sense of stability that my parents weren't able to. With a safe and secure environment, I was finally able to grow in ways I was never able to, learning to reparent myself and be my own cheerleader. We did a lot of traveling together, and we got along really well as we both prioritized stretching our budget to see more places instead of more comfort. So we backpacked to so many incredible places together. Even though that this relationship didn't work out, we became best friends, and I'm forever grateful for him. I worked hard on my career and climbed the corporate ladder. Having lived through the mistakes of my parents, I recognized the importance of living frugally and below my means. And so I saved and invested aggressively during this time, which is one of the best decisions I've made in my life. In 2018, I was experiencing signs of burnout. Living in Toronto, the work-first culture started to affect me. And it also happened to be 5 years since my life-changing trip to Kenya. So I thought I'd recreate that magical moment to remind myself the important things in life. So I took 2 months off work without pay and began my adventure to Nepal. As much as I was hoping to relive the experience, this trip was nothing like the one I had in Kenya. I found a school in the mountainous village of Nagarkot, just 32 kilometers east of Kathmandu, the capital of Nepal. Since I didn't join an organization this time around, there were many challenges I had to face, like getting lost on local bus connections, or the challenge of getting enough school supplies for the kids from local shops. And getting sick within a few days of arriving didn't help either. Despite the challenges, this trip taught me so much about gratitude. 3 years prior, in 2015, Nepal was hit by a devastating 7.8 magnitude earthquake, killing nearly 9,000 people and injuring many more. The devastation can still be seen when I was there. And what hit me the hardest were some of the students at school, who lost their parents to the earthquake and is now being cared for by their grandparents, who are old and jobless. These kids lived in neighboring villages, scattered throughout the mountainous region. To get to school, they have to trek the challenging terrains anywhere from 1 to 2 hours each way, often in their broken slippers, because that's all they have. Along with the teachers and volunteers, we visited their homes, and to deliver some supplies, new shoes, and rain jackets, walking through the same path they have to take each and every day. Even as someone who hikes regularly, the trek was not easy.
Yeah, he's tired.
While this trip was different than my previous one, it reminded me of the same values. Once again, I was reminded that the problems I have back home were rather insignificant. I was humbled by the people of Nepal, who showed me a great deal about gratitude, and that life is more than just grinding away, accumulating things, and being miserable doing so. Despite what the media is telling us, we don't need more. Despite what our society celebrates, we are not defined by our titles or social statuses. This trip to Nepal was special in its own ways. While I left Nepal not as a changed person, I felt closer to discovering who I was and what I want in life. Dhanyabad. To wrap up this adventure, I met up with 2 of my best friends in Japan, who were there for me at my lowest point in 2013. Even though we had planned this trip together in advance, it felt like a full circle for me. They were there from the beginning when this all started, and now, 5 years later, they were there too.
Peace out.
After that, the corporate grind resumed, but not for long. Within 3 years, I was completely burnt out. This time, it wasn't just a mental thing. My physical health has taken a toll as well, and I knew then it was time to take an indefinite break from this corporate grind, to focus on my health and the things that matter to me most. It's been a long 3 years of healing, and the dots are finally starting to connect. Because of my grandma, I learned how a simple life can be happy. Because of my parents' mistakes, I learned how living beyond our means can tear a family apart. Because of my childhood trauma, I have financial insecurities, which made me frugal. Because of a heartbreak, I traveled around the world to find myself. And it's because of all the people I encountered along the way, I am who I am today. I realized that life isn't about chasing after material things or titles and social statuses, and that it's okay to live a lifestyle against the grain, but true to who I am. One that doesn't involve buying things just to impress others. One that prioritizes quality time with loved ones enjoying simple pleasures. One that is intentional and responsible. A life that is simple, peaceful, content, and loving, just as my grandma showed me. This is proof that one day the dots will connect, and I've never been more grateful. So if you're feeling lost, have some faith that one day this will all make sense. When the dots start to connect, you will see that all your childhood traumas, all the hardships and challenges you endured, everyone you encountered, the ups and downs, everything happened exactly when it was supposed to. It might not make sense to you right now, but one day, it will. So be proud of yourself for making it this far. And for what it's worth, I'm proud of you too.